But when you measure it flat, it contradicts that. I'm spitting flat facts and that. And I know you don't like that. Google Maps is flat, it presents elevation profiles like that. I'm a spitting flat earth king. Sentence has a ring, doing my own thing. If earth was a big roast chicken, factually finger licking chicken. We just got the measurements missing. I'm spitting eggs and begs, begging the question lesson. I've said it before, time after time. I'm the spitting flat earth king of rhyme.
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a coffee, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now we are joined by Click OK, Refracted Curvature, Neil, Jin, Len, Arthur, and a whole bunch of people in the Flipside Discord server. So welcome one and all.
How are you?
We'll be
How you doing, everybody? How you doing? Especially in the Flipside chat there.
Good evening.
Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. We've been going through firstly, the tragedy that is my second channel at the moment in terms of the number of views I get on a premiering stream. So whenever I seem to tune into my Uncut and After show going out to the public for the first time, there might be 10, 12, 15 people, if I'm lucky, watching that show. Now, there's people who are willing to pay for memberships so they can get the Uncut and After show as soon as it's printed. That is to say, as soon as it's got recorded and then been uploaded. If you're a member of Nathan Oakley 1980, you can go and watch it immediately, pretty much. But if you're a member of the public, you can watch it for free on my second channel. But it's just hardly anybody does because it's so heavily censored. Now, there's obviously going to be some very delicious content on that particular stream that goes to nobody. It literally reaches hardly anybody, as I say, maybe 10 or 15 people are watching it currently because it's so bleeding heavily censored. But in today's pre-show, we were discussing heliocentric motion in terms of the derivation of flat plane angular measurements to lights in the sky to come up with orbital motion of both the sun and the moon. Now, I was giving fair praise to Kepler and Huygens and Copernicus in terms of their out-of-the-box thinking to take what are, in essence, flat Earth measurements and derivations of radial values with respect to circles of equal elevation and then project a world onto the protractor that has been used to measure those angles, and then put that view around the sun, or indeed, in the case of the moon around it. But the derivation still requires the initial measurements of a flat Earth for the angles to be produced. And when you can see it borne out in the model after the fact, you see that the transposition of flat to sphere leaves you with a bifurcation of a ball Earth for the orbital motion to move around the sun. In other words, when you're looking at the heliocentric version of a world that we don't actually live on, we would be described as living in, to give it any accuracy of description, around the sun, then you're in hell to describe that motion. We were also referencing where Thunderfoot in, I don't know, I'll say recently, it's probably 3 years ago now, described going to hell to describe the orbital motion to make the angles work with respect to the plane that he was measuring. But I think his terminology was something like, and then you go to the middle of the ball Earth because of reasons, or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what he was using in his language.
A little bit closer.
How did he say it?
He said, and then you convince yourself that the measurements are coming from here.
You convince yourself. God, that's even worse.
Yep.
So yeah, that was an elongated plug for my second channel. So if you're watching this on Nathan Oakley 1980 and you're unaware that I've got a second channel, in the link below this live stream, there is a link to the Nathan Oakley channel. Now, over the, whatever it is, 10 or 11 years that I've been doing Flat Earth videos, I've actually used 3 channels. One is called Oakley Chord. One is called now Flat Earth Debates, actually 4. One is called Nathan Oakley, and there's this channel, which is Nathan Oakley 1980. But initially, I published mainly to Oakley Chord, Nathan Oakley, which I thought would be my main channel. Hence, there was a whole ton of live streams for Flat Earth Debate done from that channel and not this channel. But for whatever reason, at the time, Nathan Oakley 1980 was the most algorithmically favoured, therefore grew quicker than the other 2. Therefore, it is what ended up being my main channel. But I had no idea. At one point prior to doing any of these videos, Oakley Chord was my most popular channel when I was working for an electronics company. That was my channel to publish the videos about hi-fi. So that channel had the most subscribers at the point that I started publishing videos. So my very first video, which wasn't about Flat Earth, but was more akin to what we now call the Feast of Nonsense, was about a rocket ship and its scale, talking about outer space, the sky vacuum without a hint of irony. Now, that channel is never even mentioned. I don't think anybody's aware. I mean, I still put public playlists together on a daily basis for that channel to keep it alive should it ever be needed. But ultimately, just through fate or through algorithmic favouritism, Nathan Oakley 1980, which isn't the most catchy of name, I would prefer it was just Nathan Oakley, because that's my name, right? Rather than all one word, Nathan Oakley 1980. Not the best channel name, in my opinion, but that happened to be the one that ended up catching the most subscribers. So that's where we are now. But my second channel, initially, I would have called my primary channel. That was where I did a lot of my, I think I did Mechanics of the Fourth Wall from that channel, and started Flat Earth Debate broadcasting live from that channel, and then it eventually transitioned over to this channel. Now this is the main channel. But I've actually got 4. So there's Oakley Chord, what is now renamed from Nice Plant, which I used for my pawnbroking days as a videography channel that goes alongside Nice Plant, my eBay channel. Now it's been renamed Flat Earth Debate, Oakley Chord, and this Nathan Oakley 1980. So there's 4 channels in total. But the main one I'm trying to plug here, why am I convoluting? I should just keep it simple, is Nathan Oakley channel, which is the second channel, which is where the Uncut and After Show goes out. And I've shortened the time span. So because there's only 5 shows a week, what I would do is stagger them previously up until this Christmas just gone, so that there was a delay of up to 2 or 3 months between the live stream and the Uncut and After Show stream going out to the public for the first time. But because of the period of Christmas, I like to put a show out every single day on the run up to Christmas and through Christmas on my second channel, which shortens the time, because there's obviously only 5 live shows a week for this week, because I was doing home education things yesterday. But that means that the gap is at its shortest just after Christmas now, basically. So the Uncut and After Show that went out yesterday was the Perplexity AI shows. I can't remember if it was show 1 or show 2 that went out yesterday on the second channel. But that's not so long ago, right? We only recently did that with 10th Man, the Perplexity discussion show, whatever you want to call that. That went out yesterday on Nathan Oakley channel. So, just to round out this very, very, very convoluted and long plug, go and subscribe to my second channel if you haven't done so already. And you can, if you aren't a member, pick up the shows that the members get paid for on a daily basis, but for free. There you go.
Right. Whilst we were talking about the sun and the moon, Nathan, I wondered if you'd like to go over this. You remember the moon shadow thing that happened last year regarding the sundial and the moon dial and the shadows they cast and the ramifications relating to the distance of these objects, the sun and the moon. Can you go over that again? Would you like to do that? I don't know what you mean by ramifications of distance. You're just talking about elevation angles of the moon. They're just flat Earth measurements. That's how you boil that down into the most simplistic of terms. What is a moon dial or a sundial doing? It's measuring elevation angles. That's it. It's a flat Earth measurement. In terms of distance, yeah. It doesn't give you one. Yeah.
Somebody from G+ wants to say something. Go ahead. Oh, it's Eugene interrupting me. Yes, it's just giving you elevation angles, but it doesn't give you distance. You said distance. I don't know where you're getting that from.
No, I was saying it, because of the length of the shadows, it was put forward back then on your show last year, because I was there in person, that they have to be in the same locale. Either the moon is 93 million miles away with the sun, or they're closer. Either way, there's something wrong there.
I've no idea what you're talking about.
Are you talking about the bad moon shadow where it shows the logic that states the sun has to be a really far distance away is flawed?
That's not my argument.
Yeah, but you were present when this was mentioned, by the way.
Okay, that doesn't make it mine. It's not my assertion. What I know in terms of what we
I
do.
thought you agreed with it, and that you did. Not saying it was yours, but I thought you would like to. Since you were talking about the sun and the moon, I thought that might be interesting for the listeners, to think, to ponder.
I mean, it is interesting because I like to break these things down in the most simplistic of terms currently. What is a sundial? It's a tool for measuring the Earth flat for time. That's what it actually is. Is there anything else needed? I don't think so. When I say it's not that serious, this is the perfect time for me to say that sentiment, right? What's that? Distance to the sun and moon. It's not that serious. We just measure Earth flat for time in this instance. That's it. We just measure Earth flat for it. It's very simple.
Yeah, interesting point there. That's realised, but there's also extra that you could elaborate on, and that you don't want to do that. That's fine.
You feel free.
But,
what did you want? You do it. If you want to elaborate on that, that's all I've got to say on the matter. Beyond that,
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool then. Yeah. Well, then the question is,
Go ahead.
with the shadows being casted here, is the actual moon at the same location as the sun for the shadows to be the same? Or are they really, one is supposedly 93 million miles away, and the other one being the moon, 238,000 miles away from the Earth?
Where do you
These
get that
things
number?
we cannot confirm.
Do you know
but
where
it
that
does
number comes
raise
from?
the question.
Okay, do you know where that number comes from?
Oh, because of me, they assumed the size of Venus, didn't they? And then did it that way. That's what they did, as far as I know.
Yeah, because I explained it about 20 minutes ago. But the extrapolation of Christian Huygens giving you that 93 million mile distance is the same origin we discussed in the pre-show. Flat Earth angle measurements to extrapolate radius, to superimpose a radius onto Venus. It's still a flat Earth measurement in the first instance, isn't it? So I'll just say it once more. It's not that serious. It's just measured flat. Earth, that is. In this case, angles to lights in the sky. Now, big old smarty pants can take those measurements and create all sorts of convoluted systems of heliocentric orbital motion. And then another smarty pants can come along after the fact and say, you know what, if I make an ingenious assumption, I can give us the distances. But then you're ignoring all of that and going, well, does it mean that we've got that distance? No. The distance violates the base measurement of a flat Earth for the angle because it infers a spherical world moving around the sun with a spherical Venus with a transposable radial value also derived from flat Earth angles. So does that mean that we've got an orbital Absolutely not. In reality, there is no orbital motion at all. It's a mathematical derivation based on the original observation of the lights moving through the sky and their angular representations that we can measure from a flat plane. So what's that all boiled down to? It's just a flat plane that we measure with angles to lights in the sky. Or to put it another way, Earth's just measured flat. It's not that serious.
Thank you very much, Nathan. My attempt was for you to elaborate on that. And to those who may be listening, or 12 or 15, hopefully 30 today, whatever, who might be listening, we do not know the distance to the sun. The numbers we've been given, arbitrary, never been confirmed or proven. That's what I was trying to get through there. Even though we are measuring angles to the sun from a flat Earth, that's a fact. But anything else you may be thinking about the sun, you will need to dispel because they haven't been confirmed. And that was my aim and my objective. Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's a way.
Well said.
It might be a get out of jail free card that you perceive, but there's a way that, like, I can admire and, look up to some of these mathematicians and go, wow, that's quite out of the box in terms of how you've extrapolated out this notion, rather than going, well, that's crazy. We're not standing on the outside edge of the protractor we measured the flat surface from and to for the lights to be represented on, but then change what they're on as the map of the world and then have an extended celestial view wrapped around that. That's crazy. Instead go, that's very out of the box thinking to try and figure out when Easter is and how the time actually presents itself in our concepts that we've created in the first instance. You say arbitrary, you're absolutely correct. It's been arbitrarily ascribed by these men through history that we describe throughout the last 500 years. Why? Well, because they've got tasks that they've got to fulfill. Like I said in the pre-show, like finding out when Easter is as a prime example.
What they've done is they've taken the known quantities of measurement laid against the unknown properties of the stars and reversed them to come up with this concept they keep calling a model. They fix distances to the stars when the stars, for purposes of measurement, are considered to be an undefinable distance away. It's reversing the world and making everything crazy, basically.
In order to achieve said extrapolation of a spherical surface represented by the protractor, you measured the angle of the flat ground from. In other words, here's your flat ground, and there's the angle that you're measuring to a star. Well, you've got a protractor view that's going to become the globe Earth, with an extended celestial sphere around that. When you put an antipodal second southern section, that's south, not that. That's what they describe it as, to invert the world, to give you some notion of understanding when it came to retrograde motion, as it's now known. They're trying to explain some of these motions of the lights. But in order to get there, they have to measure something specific. The ground as a flat plane to give you the base for the angle, and the sky as a parallel flat plane. Now, when you transpose what you see of the sky into the protractor that you're measuring it through, you then end up describing the extended celestial sphere as not, as John just described it, an indeterminate distance, but an infinite distance. That's how they describe it. But in Kepleria's motion, you can have Christian Huygens ascribe separately, because it's not functional within his concept of distance, a distance to all of the lights based on the Keplerian scale without distance. Why? Well, because he wanted to. As I said in the pre-show, it's not because Christian Huygens was some Satanist, assuming that he's indoctrinating the world. Likewise, Andrew Thomas Young isn't some Satanist that's assuming he's indoctrinating the world. He's, as I've been describing some of the people in this way in the last few shows, a fart sniffer. Aren't I clever? My ingenious assumption that Venus has the same radius as Earth. Now, we've backtracked, looked at these measurements and gone, well, the radius of Earth is the flat Earth measurement. You're taking the Polaris minimum on a flat plane called an area of equal elevation, and then making that the outside edge of the protractor at that distance also flat and horizontal at 3959 miles. Well, again, you can call that ingenious, you can call it crazy, but it doesn't change that to achieve what is essentially a flat ground with a flat sky being measured through a protractor to give you a protractor-based view of a world with another hemispherical view of the stars over that. You've come from two parallel planes and ended up with two protractor views of the world with a map plastered onto it and an infinite distance to the celestial stars, because they're all set against a backdrop that gave you the flat parallel plane of the sky and ground to measure it through a protractor in the first instance. But that's the only thing that really matters to me when I say it's not that serious. You don't need any of this shit. This is cluttering around my head. I don't need it. Right? Why do I need this stuff? Well, it's only because I've become a flat earther and been trained in heliocentrism. I was trying to grasp of this a year ago when I was describing us as advanced heliocentrists. I couldn't quite put my finger on where I was going with that. As a flat earther, you're trained to argue against heliocentrism. Not for how flat Earth is, just how non-spherical the world is. Well, in order to argue how non-spherical the world is, you become an advanced heliocentric understander. You've got a good grasp of Kepler and Huygens and all of these things that they've produced a ball with, so you can say how it doesn't work. This was borne out immediately when I got to this subject, with Morgile going up against trolls, and all he did was try and explain how the world was not a ball, with them saying, well, that's your flat Earth proof. He didn't have any, because all he'd done was study what was available about the world as he knew it, as a ball, to show how it wasn't. He never got to the point where he's saying, well, to create the ball that I know it isn't, that I'm describing how it fails, I needed to measure a flat Earth to get there. That's where we are 11 years later.
Yeah, we missed the measurements because we were looking for everything the Morgul was looking for, how this don't work and that don't work. Well, we missed the measurements and everything. You need the measurements. Any type of measurement they talk about will require a flat plane of reference, Earth.
Yeah, I think that the Feast of Nonsense that we were working with all this time, and then suddenly came the measurements, like realization of the measurements. Yeah, that's a big deal. But what I think is we should not stop here, like, we got the measurements and now we should close our mind, like it's the end. I think we should still have our mind open. If ever there is something maybe connected to the measurements, maybe not something that can be more adding to it.
Is it more flat?
That you were in the very beginnings of a special pleading fallacy, because what you don't know will never contradict what you do know.
That's correct. It's never going to be more flat.
What I've got on screen now, live audience, is what I'm just describing. Now, in this view, we've got this from a bull-believing numpty book describing how celestial navigation works. But in terms of how the view renders out in this plane, you should, but don't, see the equatorial plane, but it's just blacked out. Same with the extended celestial plane. This view doesn't have the equatorial or extended celestial plane depicted on it. Why? Because it would be too much of a giveaway in terms of what you're actually doing. But you can see that where is this angle measurement coming from? Well, like I described earlier and in the pre-show, from hell. Like when Thunderfoot was like, well, you just have to convince yourself you're in hell, or however he phrased it. Well, yeah, on a plane that is essentially this glorified protractor view with the latitude and longitude lines written on it, that's what's giving you those degrees on the globe. They just don't draw the flat plane in so you can see where you're actually standing. But it is absolutely intrinsic to these measurements. You've got a flat plane, in this case the equatorial plane, and extended celestial plane, to give you the angle from. That's what this is. An angle from the plane they haven't even pictured. Why? Well, because it would be too telling to average normie who comes across this. It's complicated. It looks complicated if you're unfamiliar with it. Once you understand what this represents, it isn't complicated. It's just an angle to a flat sky from a flat plane, represented with the tool that you measured the angle through. And then you've transposed the view of the stars onto a hemispherical view that has got degrees literally measured from it. And then you've put a world in between with a second protractor that you're going to put the map on when you can't be both in the world and on the world, measuring through the world to get the angle. There's only one position that the angle comes from. That's here, in hell. But no, you're on a plane, measuring an angle from the surface level to the stars on the parallel sky. That ends up being this view from outside of the box thinkers. And then 500 years later, the general public, the people at large, believe this is actually where they stand. They think they're actually standing on this map. And that is, in essence, what being a baller is. A misapprehension about how the world that's been created by the Roman Catholic Church is actually the world you stand on. It isn't. It functions from the plane you measured in the first instance. And you can't violate the plane that you measure in the first instance by saying, you know, this plane we're measuring in the middle of hell, well, forget that. We're actually standing here. No, you can't be. That violates the base measurement in the first place.
You got to be careful when you say, well, there's more, because you'll fall for ether, hook, line, and sinker. There's people that we're not going to just talk about measurements. We want more. We want to find out more. And they became etherites. So stick to what you can prove. If more knowledge comes forward, I'm sure we'll be able to find it or lay it up, but it will require a flat plane. That's for sure.
Hi Neil, Nathan. Like Nathan just explained there, the picture he was showing a minute ago, they're elevation angle measurements. So you've got there's no way out of it that will be happening from a horizontal plane, because that's the only way you can acquire an elevation angle measurement. Yeah. So they're always going to need that plane. Let's turn up, please.
Correct.
Yes, and it's always going to be described with a parallel plane for anything else that's measuring the same view. And the only way that can function is as described here. This would be you on the ground in hell. Again, what was shown in this particular view wasn't shown in the previous diagram. But here it is, the equatorial plane. Now, if you're up in an aeroplane measuring angles to the star, do they change? No. The sky is just exactly the same. It's parallel with the ground. And any position that you can draw a horizontal, because all horizontals are parallel with the plane of the horizon. Therefore, it can functionally give you the same angle up in the sky and have the same projected view of the flat sky through a protractor view, otherwise known as the infinite celestial hemisphere. Why? Well, because it functions with parallel planes. That's how the world has been dealt with, because that is how the world is. That's how it presents itself. So when we say, well, it will be measured from a flat plane, well, that's how it's measured currently to give you the world a bull belief.
Nathan, I think some idea came to my mind about the equatorial plane that they show. They say that the equatorial plane is a circle going through the globe, like a flat plane going through the globe. But when you're moving position, the circle has to also change. It cannot stay the same. It needs to change. Like when you're going across the surface of the Earth, the equatorial plane that they're showing inside the globe has to also move. So that means that the edge of the equatorial plane has to also change, which shouldn't be meaning that it will change the distance from the 90 degrees angle to Polaris. Like that equatorial line will also move distances when the position changes.
You're talking about...
No, you'll be on the ecliptic plane at that point. You'll be on one of the variant ecliptic planes that'll be out of phase with the equatorial plane by 6 degrees.
That's correct.
Yeah, you're conflating two different things. So the derivation that gives us the view previously on screen, and also technically this one as well, would be a North Star, that's Polaris, centric derivation for what we call latitude, that's then wrapped around the mapping of a ball. But in the same way that you can take that mapping structure and map it from any position, that's how you end up with azimuthal equidistant projections that can be from any point. But that's relative to you as an individual. So yes, you have your own view, but there isn't an overarching system that's been derived from every single position. Only the positions the stars are above as defined in the almanac. And that's based on time also, because they're moving. The North Pole offers something unique. The North Pole star, that is, that it doesn't move. So you can make a system derived from it with lines that are fixed. They're called latitude. The outside minimum is the equator.
So the equator plane will stay the same no matter where you are in their model, no?
But it's not in their model. It's just where is the outside edge that you can see Polaris from. As you back away from it through 360 degrees, that's flat on the ground now as opposed to through the sky. As you go around like a maypole, you'd go around it on the ground as you move around that point in the sky. Well, as you increase the circle that you look at, that is to say the degrees that are given for 1 degree, you get a declination of 1 degree of Polaris for every 60 nautical miles. Again, an arbitrary concept we've ascribed to what we observe in terms of what Polaris does if we back away from it. But it will remain a declined 1 degree around a circle. So you can move around it in a cyclical manner and see that it's in the same 1 degree decline position from zenith on that latitude line. Well, you can move out to ever increasing circles to a circle on the outside edge that would be its minimum, where it's on the horizon. That's the equator. So it's just the minimum around a circle that you can see that star from. Meanwhile, I just say it again.
Yeah, I understand.
Let me just reiterate it for the audience.
On
Just one sec.
flat Earth, I understand this on the flat Earth so easily, but it's just hard to understand it on a globe.
That's because it doesn't exist on a globe. What we've just described is only a flat Earth concept. But I just want to make that, I was just about to summarise with that. It's not that serious. We're just talking about measuring Earth flat for an angle to Polaris. It's really basic. When you say, oh, it's really complicated to understand how you got to convert it to sphericity, put the map onto the outside edge of a protractor. Yeah, but that violates the base measurement, doesn't it? The base measurement is just a flat plane with an angle to a light. Polaris. That's it. What are the lines of latitude? Well, they're just circles on the ground. Again, they're imaginary. They don't really exist. It's just as you move around a light in the sky we call Polaris, it will be 1 degree lower than zenith, around one particular circle, flat on the ground. That's called a circle of equal elevation. Now, that is what it is. But what, you can then take that circle of equal elevation and make it the top part of a globe? Call it a great circle? Yeah, you can. It's very outside of the box thinking to do so. But it is just a flat Earth measurement of a light in the sky. It's not that serious. I don't need any of this information is more over the point, right? I don't need this rattling around in my head. Now, as much as the next man, I liked getting my telescope out when I was a bit younger before I had kids. It was here, looking out that window, and I used to love it. I used to watch the moon, or I used to watch the stars that were available through that window. I used to do it for hours and hours. It was wonderful. I'd look it all up in the star charts and look up the timings that I could see certain stars at and faff and fiddle and swear and curse at my telescope when I couldn't get it to stabilise and it would go out of view before I got it in view. All those sorts of things that people who use telescopes experience, right? But I didn't need advanced heliocentrism in my head to do any of that. I could appreciate the heavens without knowing advanced heliocentrism. And at the time, when I was a heliocentrist, I had a vague appreciation for how the world was described to have functioned as a ball that I believed I was on. But now, 10 years later, I would expect anybody on this panel to outstrip Normie 10 to 1 in terms of their understanding of how heliocentrism works, for us to describe how it violates the base principle measurement of a flat planar surface to achieve angular measurements from. We don't need the heliocentric bit.
Sorry, I was just going to say before you said it, I never subscribed to that advanced heliocentrism. It just gave me a darn headache. All you need to know is about the measurements. Once you know it's measured flat, all of that stuff, you could throw it out the window because it don't exist. I'm sorry, that's just me.
No,
yeah, no, I was into it. I was well into it. And
so was I, and it gave me a headache.
Yeah, I was well into it. I enjoyed it all. But then to find out that was all just pseudoscience, well, that was the shock, ladies and gentlemen. But there you go.
Well, I mean,
I'm saying going forward, that's what I'm talking about.
You've got the right term
going
there.
Going forward, I don't need it.
They put these mathematical derivations of flat Earth measurements into the science classroom. Therefore, you've absolutely correctly identified it with the title of pseudoscience. What's pseudoscience? A claim that has not been through the scientific method that is described as being science. So the fact that heliocentrism is taught in the science class makes it the pinnacle of pseudoscience, because we are charged with being science deniers because we deny these mathematical derivations, 500 years old, come from the Roman Catholic Church because they've been put into a science category when they're not. It is correctly termed by Jin as pseudoscience. What is it in reality? It's measurements. Measurements are a flat Earth. But if you put it into a maths category, people might notice, well, what are we measuring? Maths? People know what they're doing with maths. With science, suddenly it's a bit more convoluted. You can put it in the hands of scientific priests who can tell you what's what. It's very complicated. You wouldn't understand any of this heliocentric motion. It's all very complicated. But it's just mathematics that are derived from flat Earth measurements in the first instance. That's why they've taken it out of the category of mathematics and geography and put it into science, making it pseudoscience.
Yeah, and by doing that, they gave it validity when it's in actuality, it should have been taught in the geography classes, right? They call us science deniers, but they're geography deniers.
Yep. If they want to
know
deny
what
how it's
science
measured,
is.
they are geography deniers. Where I put them on the rock of understanding that Earth is measured flat and getting on their knees to accept that fact, because that is how Earth is measured, or the hard place of let's just ignore that we actually measure a flat Earth, is to say, well, let's take it out of a maths and geography category and just reposition the hard place over here where it's science. Then we don't have to measure the Earth flat in acknowledgement of how ball-shaped it is. That kind of just can get forgotten about. And then we can have this category error world devoid of the maths and geography of the measurements of the surface of Earth as a plane and argue about whether or not we're on a ball or not. Make sure the flat earthers are arguing for it not being a ball over here in this category error. Not just saying it's flat because it's measured that way. 10 years later, that's where we're at.
You got someone saying the non-existence but working globe navigation essentially disproves anyone uses it flat, which should be impossible if it is not correct at all.
Globe systems using latitudes that we've described, like on screen now. If you draw the latitude lines onto this protractor view, you've got the angles that you describe in the global mapping system, if you want to presume that that in some way is functional as a mapping or navigation system. It isn't. You're not using globes to measure your angles to the sun for celestial navigation. That's not what you're doing. But they want to infer that because they've got a globe and it has got degrees on it, that somehow that's a functional system for navigation. It isn't. The degrees come from a flat Earth. We've just gone through this.
They're holding up a projection of flat plane measurements and claiming that their projection, which is a distortion of the measurements, is truth. As a couple of years back, it was when I was a glober, one of the things I liked doing was pointing out the azimuthal equidistant projection was of a globe. So anything that you found correct within it was correct to the globe. So flat earthers really didn't know what to do with that, you know.
Now we say the projection of the globe comes from the flat Earth elevation angle measurements to the lights in the first instance.
If there is no flat Earth map, how do you reckon circles of equal altitude for celestial navigation should work?
They do work. When people say, how do I think they should work? I'm not out at sea. Now, we were sent a video that we could be covering shortly about a guy who's out without GPS, finding his position with celestial navigation. He takes 3 or 4 fixes with the sun each day to find out where they are and cross-reference it to a dead reckoning assumption of where they are, so that they can find their way around with flat Earth elevation angles. But the systems that are transcribed onto the maps and charts are just, as I've described previously, Polaris-based measurements, areas of equal elevation, derived from the angle measurement to Polaris. So when you start asking, well, how does that work with a flat Earth? It only works with a flat Earth. All of these systems are derived from those flat Earth measurements. There's no exception to that.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I want to say before we move on.
Yeah, John.
One thing I want to say before we move on from the category error is it's partially our fault as flat earthers when we ask them why something does something. Like, why do we see too far on a globe? Right? We are putting that in giving them the authority to answer that question. We should not be doing that with them.
That's correct.
And also, we should not sniff our own farts so much as to start answering questions. So in the pre-show, there was an inference that we had some advanced knowledge about the moon and what it does. It's like, no, we don't. But because we're being asked, we should answer the question about it. No, absolutely not. If you don't know something, just say, I don't know. Like Jin did in the pre-show. He's like, I don't know what the moon is. Well, that's the end of that discussion.
Well, the guy's asking, how could it be working on both?
It isn't.
You're not comprehending.
Again, why is this person asking anything? Because they fear the loss of their religion in a ball that they've got currently adhered to. And by what? Finding out how an advanced knowledge of each work in contrast to each other? All you're trying to do, the person that's talking to Neil, is keep the debate alive. Okay? Why? So that you can feel some comfort that you might still have a ball beneath your feet. That's the only thing that I'm reading between the lines in terms of what Neil's giving us. You just want there to be two sides. There isn't. As we keep explaining, the ball is created with the flat earth measurements. So if you want to put it into a dichotomy, it's not. You can only describe that dichotomy with one side violating the base principle measurements and the base principle measurements. The base principle measurements are flat. The derivation of those measurements, with some outside-of-the-box thinking, transposes the angles you measure off a flat plane onto a curved surface that doesn't exist. So you want to say, how does it work with both? It doesn't. You've transposed the flat earth prerequisite measurements of surface level onto a non-existent map through which you've got an extended celestial view of the stars on a glorified protractor. You want to call that working? No, it violates the angles you measured in the first place. To take the ground that you're standing on to measure the angle and say, oh, that's up at a curve on my protractor now. That's absurd. No, it doesn't work. Nothing works on a globe. It's an outside-of-the-box conceptualization of a world to try and solve for epicycles and give you retrograde motion and when Easter's going to be. Mathematically only. How we've come to be on that sphere that was inferred through Kepler and Huygens is beyond me. I don't know how that's happened. I would assume that some psychopath somewhere has gone, that's quite useful to keep people under control with. Maybe not, though. I don't know. Maybe we're all just dumb enough to think, well, if the mathematicians of the church have said that's the way the world is, then it must be so. And we still adhere to that 500 years later. Fair enough.
That's my point, though, is when you put a fact, like a measurement, into a what-if statement where the measurement can be false, but still hold the measurement, you're inviting, all kinds of wrong conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely right, John. I've never done that, especially when you were talking about why do we see too far. I've never put that question to any glober we're now moving to 11 years of this situation of realizing that the earth is indeed measured and utilized flat. I've never ever said to anybody, why do we see too far? No, I tell them point blank straight to the head is that we are seeing further than the earth's curvature would allow
Same thing.
If it were there. If it were there, let me finish what I've got to say. If it were there, that is a legit statement to make. I'm not giving them any leeways for arguing. I'm shutting them down completely. And remember, I did preface it with it is measured flat and utilized flat.
You're not. That opens up the discussion to put it into a dichotomy by saying we're seeing than the globe Earth allows. What do you mean the globe Earth allows? That globe Earth isn't the arbiter of
would allow.
I'm still talking.
Would allow is what I said. Yeah.
Still talking. The globe Earth is not the arbiter of how far we see. But what we do utilise to describe how far we see is perspective. The same angular description that we can extrapolate out from the stars. Now, I'm not suggesting that we've got a perspective view of the stars. They don't obey the same rules that terrestrial things, when described with perspective measurements, do adhere to. However, the angular description does adhere to the principal measurement of Earth's surface to create the ball, to then suggest that that violation of the base principle measurement gives us an arbiter of how far we should see, to then ask an opponent or tell them that we're seeing further than the dictated distance that a globe Earth extrapolated out from a violation of the base flat measurements would give you if it existed. That is you enabling the opponent to put it into a dichotomy, while simultaneously saying, I haven't done that. Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing.
It's never happened to me because I've always shut them down with it. So that's the thing.
You just ignored every word I just said.
Because we're going to the measurements, you see. That's the
Is
thing.
it a lack
And when
of
we go to the
comprehension, or
measurements,
did he just ignore everything I just said?
No, I haven't ignored anything you did.
You've just told me that you're shutting it down, and I've just said the absolute antithesis of that. You're opening up the discussion and putting it into a dichotomy when you lay it out in the terms that you have, because you're taking something that requires we measure Earth flat to create something that violates the measurement of a flat Earth, to then suggest that that will dictate how far we see, and then point out that it won't be as far as that suggests we should see if that was true. That's what you're doing. Well, that is enabling. I'm still in the same sentence. It's the third time you've interrupted this, Jin. You don't have to like it, right? You're enabling them.
I don't feel that I'm doing that at all. And like I said, I'm telling them that we are seeing further than your dream ball would allow if it were there.
I heard you the first 4 times you said it.
Hang on, because we are seeing further.
Further than what?
You cannot be living.
You just ignored me.
You're not listening. You're not listening.
I am listening.
To the fantasy ball. Then you're ignoring what I'm saying. To the fantasy ball that they believe they live on.
Where did that ball come from?
Out of someone's arse, basically.
No, it's not out of someone's arse. It's out of derivations of flat Earth radial values measured with Polaris. Now, I do understand this stuff. I also understand at a base level that you are enabling them. But you're telling me you're shutting them down. In your mind, you're doing a good job. Now, old school Nathan would have patted you on the back. Now I'm saying no. By suggesting that the ball Earth, in violation of its base measurements of a flat plane, as depicted on screen now, would mean that you ignore how flat you must create a world to be, to suggest that that world that you've created with those flat Earth measurements you're violating dictates how far we should see, for you to say that it's wrong.
Yeah, it might be a long way round to get to that point, but the point is still mentioned and made, and they do get shut down. They don't have any arguments with that with me.
Well, see, I can tell you why we see further than what you're saying the limits of our vision should be.
I'm not saying I'm not actually putting the only limit there would be that curvature that's not there. That's all I'm saying.
Oh my God.
That'd be the only limit. That ball Earth, that's not there.
Like I said,
Are you sure? I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
like I said, and I can tell you why what you're claiming to be the limitation, we can see further than that. We got a little experiment we can do. How about that?
Now we're into a full-on dichotomy debate between one and the other, aren't we?
Yeah, but the truth always will prevail.
No, the argument will continue. That's what we've had for 10 years. An argument about whether or not it's bleeding ball-shaped. The ball-shaped bit, to argue about whether or not that's going to dictate the distance we can see, is derived from flat Earth measurements. So all of this nonsense about how far we're going to see based on ball extrapolations that have come from violations of their initial measurements of a flat Earth, why not just point out that we've got to measure a flat Earth to come up with the radial value? What's that? If the baller says, oh, well, I know how far we should see because I've got curved mathematics, all right, what's this radial value? Where's that come from? Oh, a flat Earth minimal elevation angle measurement to Polaris, so we measure Earth flat then? What's the end of this discussion? No. If I take that flat Earth measurement of a radial value, I can put it into this mathematics that suggests how far we see. Yeah, but we had to measure Earth flat to get the radial value, so Earth's measured flat. That makes the whole principle of saying that we will see from the outside edge with a description that uses mathematics that give you a differential from eye level to surface level, another flat Earth prerequisite in Earth curve maths, is absurd 2 steps down the begging the question of a sphere that violates its own flat Earth measurements by saying this piece of globe will dictate how far we see, but we can see further. So I'm shutting down the argument. No, you're enabling the argument to take place. That's what all of us have done for 10 years.
Yeah, but successfully beating them in doing so, because we're proving to them that they are wrong, and we bring evidence of our proofs to them. So I'm going to carry on doing that. I don't care what anyone says. And because there are times when you give them the measurements, as I've said at the very beginning, and they only 1 or 2 seem to accept that. But the 80% of the people I meet on this, 8 out
Doesn't
of 10.
matter.
Okay, let me just
Measurements are
explain.
not
Let me just- hold on,
accepted. They're
hold on.
adhered.
I
Neil,
know, but you
hold on a
still have
second,
to
Neil.
explain it.
Let me just explain something to you, Jin, right? When you say some of them will accept the measurements, what the radial value that they need to extrapolate from the flat Earth measurements to have the ball for it to say how far we see. Well, if they don't accept those flat Earth measurements to derive a radial value, they don't have a ball to argue with. Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I do understand, and I see it through to the end. That's me, yeah.
No,
I do understand.
It's not seeing through to the end. It's starting with the flat Earth measurements that they need to accept. You give them a choice. Either you accept that you've measured a flat Earth to give you radius, or you don't have a radius. Hard place. You don't want the measurements of a flat Earth to give you your ball to dictate your distance. You don't want that radius because it's come from a flat Earth. Then you haven't got a ball to argue for anymore. Oh, you do want to accept that we've got a radial value derivation from flat Earth measurements. Then Earth is measured flat. But what, you want to use the flat Earth measurements to derive a radius and then ignore that we've measured Earth flat so you can argue for how far a ball will dictate we see? No.
No,
I haven't finished, Jin. 5th fucking time. Shut up. You can hear me talking, right? Now, I'm sick of this, Jin. Go and argue for how ball-shaped things are and how far it'll dictate your vision. I'll point out that to have a ball that you're arguing about whether or not it'll dictate how far you see because it's wrong will require you measure a radius flat to get to that ball. And if you say, well, only 80% of them will accept the radius value they're basing their argument on, that comes from a flat Earth that they must accept. If they don't accept it, they haven't got a ball to argue for the distance they say you should see with, or for you to enable them to have that argument for how far you say it won't dictate we see with. Ultimately, to have that discussion you're enabling, first you measure Earth flat for radius. To have that discussion. But if you can say, well, to have this discussion about whether or not a ball dictates how far we see, first we must measure Earth flat. Now, if you've measured Earth flat to get to the radius, to then argue about how far we see, you've already measured Earth flat. The discussion's over the minute you've got a measurement to make a ball with. So you don't need to argue the toss about whether or not it's too far to see on a ball. Where did the ball come from? Flat Earth measurements. Oh, well, they don't understand that. Well, if they don't understand it, they can't make a ball with it. If they do understand it, get on their fucking knees and acknowledge how flat Earth is measured to give them a ball to argue about.
This is why there's still a
I
debate.
can now respond after all of that. My position is not going to change. I'm going to go all the way around, put them in the hard place with their stupidity and flog them to death. That's what I do. Sorry, Nathan. That's what I'm going to do.
That's why the debate's still going on.
Well, that's okay. If it goes on, then it goes on and people will learn.
But there is
Simple
no
as that.
debate.
Thank you.
There is no debate
I'm not the
because
only one.
your debate requires one side takes flat Earth measurements and creates a ball to say how far we can see. And then you come along to say that the ball that required flat Earth measurements be utilised to create a ball to say how far we can see isn't how far we see. Notice how both sides have got a flat Earth prerequisite measurement for radius. You to say that it's wrong and for them to say it's right. So you're saying that you're smashing them to bits? No. You're enabling them with a debate that doesn't exist. Both sides require a flat measurement of radius. So we've got a flat measurement of radius then? So Earth's measured flat then? Well, that's the end of that discussion then. Back on the rock of, so to have an argument at all about how far we see, we will measure Earth flat then. The rock. Yeah, we will. End of discussion. We measure Earth flat. Oh, no. I want to take the flat Earth measurement and create a ball. Well, you can't. You've got a flat Earth measurement. Well, let's ignore that we have to measure Earth flat. Well, then you haven't got a ball. That's called the hard place. Oh, I don't like the measurements. I don't want to accept them or I don't understand them. Well, then you haven't got a ball to infer how far we'll see then, have you? Oh, right, well, okay, fine. We'll have a little bit of measuring Earth flat to get radius. Earth's measured flat. On your fucking knees, we've got to measure Earth flat to get radius. Oh, right, well, if I acknowledge that we're on a flat Earth to measure radius, can I have the argument for a ball? Why? You're violating your measurements of a flat Earth to get radius. That's called the rock. So they can either acknowledge that they're measuring Earth flat for radius, In which case, that's the end of the discussion. There's nothing more to do with measured Earth flat. Or they can say, I don't like those measurements of a flat Earth for radius. Well, then you haven't got a ball to argue for, have you?
It's like I said, I will continue to do what I do and what I do good. It's the mechanics of it all. Yes, I do hit them with the fact that it's measured flat and you need the Earth flat to get your globe. I flog them with everything. And that's what I'm going to continue to do, regardless of what you've just said there, which is what I'm fully aware of. Fully aware of what you said. Still going to operate under my own standards. Thanks.
Okay, those standards were given to us to argue about. We've been segregated into a community where we argue for or against a ball.
That's correct. Are we ever going to do this video?
No, it's 5-3.
It's only 5 to 9 where I'm at.
That's a difference in time. You'll need a flat Earth for that.
You better believe you will. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You're right on point. It just to me, it just continues the argument and gives them a reason to argue, because we're giving them a reason to argue. Debate is over. We recognize it's never been a debate. It's just plow forward there. Anything else is just, in my opinion, enabling the argument. That's not even an argument to continue.
It's me shutting down all the doors and all their hope. That's what I'm doing. So I'm prolonging their punishment is what I'm doing. That's how I see it. I don't see it as enabling anything. I'm shutting down every little avenue they've got. And I'm going to continue to do that. That's always been my way.
Well, as you can see in the Isle of Man debate, the refractive index on the day is what dictated what is obstructed by the horizon. Does anybody remember that?
Of course.
Yep.
Yep. Anthony Riley. Yep.
What about Anthony Riley?
Riley said that?
Anthony Riley didn't dictate the refractive index, he called it dirty air.
He's not getting what you're putting down refracted.
Yeah, it's like they're meat and potatoes, because you're moving away from any valid point, and you're moving into completely fantastical absurdity and ambiguity. That's where the globe exists, in the mind of the person who believes in it. It lives in the unknown. That's where they need to be.
That's correct. So every time you talk about it, you're in imagination land. So you shut it down, but then you bring it back to life. You're like killing it and resurrecting it to kill it again. Makes no sense to me.
No, it's called enjoying the punishment delivery.
On a lighter note, I've got a patron who I shouted out slightly more extensively on today's pre-show. Tomorrow her name is Level Playing Poem, the Patreon shout out that gets done daily, is sending me some flat earth poetry books. So I shared with her telling me that she's going to be posting these out to me with my 2 daughters. Now she's also got an upcoming book that's going to get published, which I've also been privileged enough to see some of the drafts of, and she's sending me one of those, an advanced copy as well, which I'm very excited about. Big shout out to you, Level Playing Poem. So there's going to be material available for purchase, presumably in the form of this new book, and indeed her already published poetry books that I get to read to my daughters, which is lovely. Now, because I videoed me telling my 2 daughters, we're going to get some flat earth poetry books that we can read together, I presented that to Level Playing Poem, and in exchange she sent me some pictures of her beautiful family. So I got to have a little email back and forth exchange with her this morning saying it's really nice to see some angels in the world when I'm typically surrounded by monsters. So it's just something that really did bring me, it was uplifting, it was nice to just see a really beautiful family presented and say, hey, we enjoy your show. They're obviously one of my patrons, and just sharing nice loving, wholesome, happy families with each other. It was just a really pleasant experience to do so this morning, off the back of us both writing books, being a farther advanced stage than I am currently. But big shout out to you, Level Playing Poem. It was really, really nice to see your beautiful family via email today. Thank you so much. It really was.
I would like to issue a challenge if I could, Nathan. The paraphrase that I gave about the refractive index on the day deciding how far we should see with respect to the obstruction at the horizon. I'd like, in the context of this debate in this show, see if anyone can find who initially said it with citation of the show. If anybody wants to take that up.
Why, was it a quote?
Yeah. Yeah. And now it was paraphrased. It wasn't a direct quote, but the spirit of what they were claiming was there. But I was going through some of your old shows, and
okay.
I think I got it pretty far back.
Yeah, you're talking about 8 years ago, aren't you?
I can't give a time because then, if it's a scavenger hunt kind of thing, just write your answer in the comments section if you think you found it.
I mean, if I was to make a guess, a wild guess, I'd say it was something like the Rumpus, but I'm not going to ask you to answer either way because we'll get the commenters to suggest who's put that notion forward that was just echoed, paraphrased by John moments ago. If you know, I'm sure John will point it out. Cover it again on tomorrow's show, potentially, along with a video about the guy that I talked about earlier on his little boat with his mate doing celestial navigation on a daily basis because they're travelling without GPS. They're doing it all old school, getting their fix daily, comparing it to Dead Reckoning. Very interesting. It was shared by... Who was it that shared that?
That was Jardo, I believe.
Yeah, it was Jardo. Big shout out to you, Jardo, for sharing that. I was genuinely delighted when I got that. So what I've been asking my panel to do is provide videos of normies measuring Earth flat. Well, in this instance, albeit a total reliance on celestial navigation, this particular normie has gone out on a boat and gone, can I do this old school with a sextant? The answer is yes. And he's showing it with all of the mathematics after the flat Earth measurement of angle to the sun. And he's pointing out that he's having to do this half a dozen times a day to make sure they don't get lost. Now, is that 100% necessary? Probably not. But I would be overly fastidious if it was me in the same position. Why? Because I don't want to die out on the ocean. And I'm sure he's exactly the same in terms of his mentality. I want to know exactly where we're going and double and triple and quadruple check it on a daily basis.
Well, we should run over it then, because that's what the guy was saying in chat. The Dead Reckoning uses spherical trig. So it'd be good to go over this tomorrow, this video.
Sure, we will do, yeah. But yeah, again, shout out to Jardo for providing it. It's just what I was after. It's right up my street. And unlike a lot of other stuff where I get 25 seconds in it and I'm like spitting feathers going, why am I responding to somebody begging the question of sphericity and having to argue it from a non-spherical position? It's like, ugh, not again. I just want to move away from this shit. And then we get to somebody who's like, here's how I measure my angle to the sun 5 times daily. Like, all right, so you're just measuring a flat earth then? Wonderful. Let's go and have a look at that. He's just a normie. Did he make any apologetics for non-sphericity? No, didn't even mention it. Just measured Earth flat, plotted it on a flat piece of paper. And that was it. Really easy. Wrote down the degrees. How many do I map, plus or minus? You're like, yeah.
Yeah, but Nathan, the whole time he thinks he's on a globe.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't even mention it. It never gets mentioned because it doesn't come into the subject. When he's measuring the angles to the sun, he's measuring angles to the sun, writing them down, putting a little degree symbol after it, and then doing his maths from there. There is no sphere. What are you talking about? Literally, there is no sphericity in anything that we'll be covering in that guy's video.
Wonderful, isn't it?
Just using the base principles that we created all the maps and charts with in the first place. So obviously they're going to work.
Yeah, but as Neil said, you know, if asked, he'd be saying he lives on a globe. If asked.
He was taking the piss out of you, actually, Jin.
I know he was.
Jin knows that.
But I always back it up, remember? That's me. All the way.
It's all in good fun. We know you're old school, Jin, and we know you're not going to change your approach.
Well, I
But
bloody hope
that
you will.
penny's going to drop one day on a live show, and we're going to shout for joy.
You are my everyman in this regard. You're my every flat earther. Neil's my everyman, right? My guy who represents the general public in terms of... He's just a normie. Sorry, Neil, but you are. You're just average Joe. Now,
I hope so.
well, you are. That's how I view you on the show. That's who you're representing. But Jin is representing every single anti-glober that we've rubbed shoulders with for the last 10 years in terms of his attitude. So his dogged determination to keep this debate alive is something that I want to train out of him. So if I fail, if Jin gets so annoyed with me that he buggers off, then I have failed completely. When Jin goes, you know what a waste of time. What am I doing? It's just measured flat. It's not that serious. Then I'll know I've done a good job. At the moment, he's like, no, that's how it's been done. I don't want to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks because I don't think that's true. I am that old dog.
I am aware of the new trick. I use it when necessary, bring it up at first, but there are times when I'm embroiled in other situations, and then I use other routes and methods and terminologies and the mechanics of their stupidity to bring them down. That's what it's all about. So, I mean, for the long haul, man, you don't know me. Every road I will explore. Every road. I'm enjoying it. Remember? I'm not hating it. I'm enjoying it. I'm not fed up yet.
Don't all the roads lead to flat Earth?
Yes, they do.
Exactly.
So
I'm
measurements.
leading them there.
Well, the quicker we can get shortcuts put in place, Jin, the better. I was about to call you Neil.
Yeah, I agree
I
with
want
that.
to
But
be
sometimes
alive
the long shot,
when
the long
things
cut
start
is the cut that's necessary sometimes.
Hold on, 8 Queen.
Sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead, 8 Queen.
I say that I wish to be alive when things starting to flip on our side.
Yeah, that's kind
You're
of...
talking about hitting critical mass, the tipping point.
It's a weird one. Tipping point is also a point of indifference.
Yeah, the tipping point.
Yeah, so there's a fantasy where suddenly everyone starts going around declaring that Earth's flat because they understand as we understand. But in my vision of the future in that regard, there's an apathy that will come along with it. Now, I've tried to explain this, and I'm not doing a great job of it currently, where I'm saying, well, people will say words to the effect of, we always knew it was flat. What I'm trying to communicate is an apathy where people don't care about it. In other words, the majority of people have an attitude when you bring it up as an anti-glober, formerly known as flat earther, that what difference does it make if Earth's not a ball? That's the attitude that I want them to have when it comes to understanding and appreciating how Earth always was being dealt with. In other words, a sense of indifference will allow the public to realise that they're on a flat plane. Whereas if there's an air of disdain because they've been lied to, then that'll never be tolerated by the people who control the world. They don't want an uprising. So there's got to be a facility to allow a sense of apathy towards the old school rhetoric of heliocentrism, or even an appreciation for how that complex maths allows some semblance of understanding of the light movements that we observe in the sky. Doesn't mean we're on a spherical surface, we're measuring Earth flat to achieve said outside-the-box thinking. But even then, it's just not that serious. We measure Earth flat, and I can only envisage that to have it tolerable that the world can say such things, There must be an apathy where people don't care. They don't want to brace against NASA. They don't want to go out with pitchforks and torches and go get them because we've been lied to. If that is or remains being the attitude, then it will just never be tolerated. That is to say, I can't see my second channel getting more than 12 views if we're marching along a road that is pitchforks and torches. If we're marching towards a road of apathy, then eventually they'll go, no, this is harmless to allow the world to appreciate how we measure
I don't
Earth.
think you can, Nathan, because I'm going to tell you why. I don't think you can because of the rest that the everyday man is facing throughout the world, especially in America. And they will get pitchforks if that does hit a tipping point because they're going to demand money back. I mean, what has NASA provided? Nathan, you're talking about billions of dollars being funneled through this freaking NASA organization for how long? It's its freaking inception. So I don't think it can be received with apathy. I don't see it.
Then it can't be received.
It has to be, because if you get the pitchforks and the torches out, right, they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you're going to end up with people like Jaron was, where science has lied to us, and you're going to see. It needs to be the apathetic approach is the only safe way to introduce this information.
Well, unless we could separate it like we've been trying to do. We've been trying to separate it from the topic of science and bring it to where it is geography. I mean, if people get an understanding of it, then, I don't know. To me, it just seems like it's unavoidable. That's why I don't think it's ever going to hit its tipping point.
Yeah, well, I'll agree with Neil just a little bit there on the point that people will not be satisfied with being lied to, and industries making their billions whilst they're struggling to live, and the fact that the Earth is indeed flat all along. We people who want the education system changed, etc., etc. That's what I'm hoping for. So that tipping point and the pitchforks may be a bit extreme, but people will be out there petitioning for a better education for their children, for the money they're putting down for the education that they're not getting.
Yeah, but look at all the people. Look at all the toes you're stepping on, right? The world knows Earth is flat tomorrow. That's a lot of toes you're stepping on.
Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right, Neil. Yeah, breaking feet as we go along. Yeah.
We can't be. That's the thing. We've got to exercise
I think there will be. I think there will be a period when a lot of people will know the Earth is flat, but they will keep it quiet and secret to themselves without knowing that a lot of them already know this, because they will not know how many of us we are.
I think you'd be surprised.
Yeah,
I think
people with money.
I think we're already there. I think that is already, as the case may be. People don't want to be mocked and ridiculed because they're aware that is the case. So I think there is a silent, potentially majority of people who do appreciate this. Anyway, shout out to Tony Ioming1. Hope I'm said your name right.
Tony Ioming.
Tony Ioming. I don't control anybody on the panel, right? I hope to have influence over the people that are surrounding me. That is the best I can hope for. So Tony's sentiment, I'll just read his super chat. Nathan, please stop Jin from making Effie look stupid. He goes on other Discords and shows the flat mockumentary with Bilu in it. Okay, I don't control him. I'm not his boss. I'm not his mum. So I've got only my power of influence over someone like Jin. And that's a tentative tightrope where I want to keep him on side. And I'm not his boss. I can't tell him what to do. He can do whatever he likes.
What's Bilu?
Yeah, it's not worth mentioning. I have no affiliation with Bilu. He's referring to the documentary called The Convex Stuff, the full documentary, which is an hour and a half. I happen to agree with the first hour and a half of it because the Brazilians took their time to go out and use measurements to prove that Earth is indeed flat. And I adhered to that. The other half, they were into Speculation Avenue. I'm not into the speculative part of that documentary, and that's it, basically. But apparently they did some other thing to do with some kind of alien or something, which I was not aware of that documentary. I've never watched it, not interested. So the guy who said whatever, no one controls me, man. You're the slave, not me. Thanks.
Yeah, but you just said you have no part in that. You're just paying attention to the first part where they measured Earth flat. So you don't adhere to the other part. So I don't understand why he's holding you accountable for that.
Did someone say convex Earth?
Yes, that's the documentary with Beeler in the bush.
Actually, Bilu does not make any appearance in the documentary.
He's in a
That's
bush.
a separate documentary about aliens. No, he doesn't. In the documentary that I'm referring to, which I've got a podcast and the documentary, Bilu is not even mentioned. It's not there at all. So that's something else that they tried to convolute. Nothing to do with
Somebody fill me
Bilu.
in who Bilu is.
I don't even know who it is. Some alien thing. That I like I said,
Oh, an
I haven't watched-
alien. I got it.
Yeah,
I
I
got it.
haven't even watched that documentary. I never knew it was out there. It was out there before I watched the convex stuff, which came out in 2011. So, that's when they began it. Sorry,
Another shout out.
they began
to
2011.
one sec, sorry. Shout out to Unitox Femu, who says, height of your town is parallel with sea level. That's correct. I like using that. That's one I actually use on my family, Unitox Femu. So I literally only use that in the last 24 hours with my mother. So I was describing where I am and saying, oh, we're about 250 feet above sea level where I am. And in order to describe where I am in Leamington as being 250 feet above sea level, you need the level to be parallel with the sea at my position to give that measurement. So in terms of Earth measurements, in the most simplistic terms, in terms of how Earth has been charted and mapped, in this case, the topographical changes in the vertical, that's height, are described from sea level. So I'm all the way inland, I'm right in the middle of England, and I'm only 250 feet higher than the parallel plane of the sea at the coast, several hundred miles away. So when you describe your height of the town that you're at with feet above sea level, you're describing a parallel vertical measurement of Earth's surface. I love that. Shout out to you, Unitox Femu. I absolutely love that.
All right, so then hold on. Refracted, you're still here, right? I know you follow football. So that means for years, when the Denver Broncos play at a stadium in Colorado called Mile High, does that mean mile high above sea level?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Exactly.
Oh,
So you've got a parallel plane. So if you imagine that's, I don't know where Colorado is in respect to, I'm not clued up on my US geography, but in terms of where it is versus the sea, presumably considerably inland, but you're still only a mile up compared to the coast. So in terms of the vertical ascribed height measurement of the surface level, it's a mile higher than the coast. So there's only a mile difference between you inland and the coast in elevation.
that's pretty cool. And from what I understand, they're used to the air there. But other teams that come in, they have to adjust. So
Yes,
the
there is a
breathing is not
pressure
the
gradient.
same.
There is a pressure gradient, and the air pressure is lower the higher you go up.
Oh dear, did you say up?
Yeah.
I also said higher.
Higher? Yes.
Word, exactly.
And you also said gradient.
Every word described by John in terms of the pressure differential measured from sea level when going up perpendicular to a plane of reference, in this case sea level, for the altitude measured from sea level, for the mile that's different between the coast and Colorado, all measured from a flat plane of reference. The difference being your parallel position with respect to the measurement of sea level. So every single aspect of that description for how difficult it is for a footballer to breathe when playing a game in Colorado is to describe Earth flat about 6 different ways.
It's amazing how far we've come. But yep, that's it. Earth is measured flat. Can't get around that.
Indeed. With that, I'm going to say if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, though, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So, another massive thank you first and foremost to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member. I'll shout it out again, so go and subscribe to my second channel, which is just called Nathan Oakley. Nathan with a space and then Oakley. So, unlike this, which is Nathan Oakley 1980, all one word, just Nathan space Oakley, which is linked below, so you can keep up with the uncut and after show, which comes out, I don't know, maybe 10 days after it goes out to members who are paying to see that material. So if you haven't done so already, please go and subscribe to my second channel called Nathan Oakley. Another massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
But when you measure it flat, it contradicts that. I'm spitting flat facts and that. And I know you don't like that. Google Maps is flat, it presents elevation profiles like that. I'm a spitting flat earth king. Sentence has a ring, doing my own thing. If earth was a big roast chicken, factually finger licking chicken, we just got the measurements missing. I'm spitting eggs and begs, begging the question lesson. I've said it before, time after time. I'm the spitting flat earth king of rhyme.